So, Whimsy, what have you been
Yes.
watching recently?
Well, right now, currently, I am in the middle of watching Beastars. And I have only watched about like four-ish episodes, give or take. I'm bad at numbers. I mean, I'm not, but I'm bad at memory number. Um, I'm bad at speaking. But yes, Beastars. I very much enjoy it so far. I gotta say, there are a lot of series. Well, not a lot of series, but there are some very notable, they stand out, they come to mind series. One in particular, a few in particular actually, where there's an edgy main character and he's like, I'm in love, but I kind of want to eat you though. Edgy, right? Right? Well, this is that done well. Cough, cough, Twilight. Go away. Cough, cough. This is way better. I'm gonna get so much hate for comparing Beastars to Twilight. No. I'm just saying, though, that, like, you can do this premise where you in love, but you also want to eat the person, and you could do it well. All right? Take that, Twilight fans. But no, it's good because it really delves into like the idea of like a person desperately wanting to be good. Um, I'm so sleep deprived. Desperately wanting to be good, but then like having like urges or like desires that they can't control. Well, they control, but that like they control their actions, but they can't control the urge. You know what I mean?
Fixate.
Yeah, like fixations or urges that like they can't, they're trying desperately like bottle up. It really explores that well. And but not only that, but like how that those urges feed into like identity. Because I found it really interesting. I think Eddie's brought this up before actually during Beastars, that like at least temporarily, I haven't watched the whole show and I'm sure this was not a permanent fix, but at least temporarily, his dilemma about like, am I a monster because I have these urges, was kind of put on halt, because somebody acknowledged him for the first time as like a man, like as like a male wolf. And so it was really interesting how sort of like the different identities kind of like play off each other or like override each other, and how identity centered his sort of like crisis seems to be. I'm finding that like really interesting to watch, and I'm really curious to see like where they take that, especially because the world is so heavily centered around like their different animal identities and like how they kind of mesh or don't mesh in some cases, together in this sort of like setting that's supposed to be very like cohesive, but people like jolt and are terrified at the sight of their classmates. You know what I mean? So how cohesive is it really? It's just really interesting, and I'm really looking forward to seeing kind of where this goes, and where they take it. And it is. I also very much. It feels like an art piece, like the whole thing, not just because of like the unique CGI and like the unique character designs, but everything from like the music and like the way they play with the fact that this is about theater. Just makes the whole thing feel like a very solid, cohesive work of art, and that is something that I feel like I love seeing in media, that they're really nailing in this series. So, yes, this has motivated me to like go watch Beastars like right now when we finish recording, because I just like I'm really intrigued and I really want to see where this story goes, and I highly recommend it. And it's okay to watch Beastars, whether or not it makes you a furry now, okay? Independent of that. You do you. Go watch Beastars. It be good. The memes be good. The show be good. Yay. Any questions?
Yeah, I actually have a question for you.
Yes.
So this is the part that's interested me for a long time, mostly because when the discourse I had with friends who watch anime came up around when Beastars was still, only in a manga form, and it started very recently. Why do you think it's so ingrained with people's ideas or depictions of furry culture?
I feel like a lot of that just has to do with internet culture, in general. So when a subculture is sort of like not well understood or is kind of like frequently mocked, I feel like that really lends itself to like memeism, whether or not like that's fair. Like, I mean, furries, a lot of furries are great people and like shouldn't be mocked. But like when a community historically has been so much, it sort of really like is just naturally going to be ingrained with like memes. And so I feel like the sort of memification of furries kind of made it like an inevitability that like Beastars would become associated with like furry memes. And to be fair, even though I did say something like very defensive of furries, I'm not saying that like it's bad to share memes or meme, because a lot of people meme on themselves in their own community. So I'm not casting judgment in either direction. The nature of like the internet culture now is also self-deprecation and like poking fun at yourself and kind of like taking some of that memification back. So the memification can have a lot of different intents and whatever. But just in general, how many times can I say memification in this? The memification has a lot to do with why the discourse around Beastars probably couldn't really be separated by people's like perception of, oh wait, this is furry art, right? And so it kind of makes sense, especially because anime in itself is always so memeified, that the two would sort of like just inherently become fused in the discourse. And why that would become sort of like the focal narrative of like, this is the furry anime. You like Beastars, you're a furry now. Like, I feel like that was just kind of inevitable due to just the nature of like the internet, of anime culture, internet culture, perceptions of furries, like all these things kind of converge. And I feel like this was just sort of like the natural coalescence of many different things that internet historians could write anthropological essays on. Yeah, don't know if that answered your question, but that is my thought process.
Kind of, yeah. Would you consider Beastars to be a furry piece of media? Because I feel like in my mind, I don't really see it that way. I feel like there's a lot of really interesting things about interesting writing ideas and character ideas that occur in Beastars, and I'm, at least in my experience, I'm not sure if like any of them actually match up with like, in general terms, you know, furry ideology or like ideas about furry identity.
I would say that because I do have like I have been friends with furries, and the way that it's always been described to me is that like the loose, most broad definition of furry is just anthropomorphic animals. So in that sense, like, yes, I would say that Beastars does fall into that, just as like any other sort of like cartoonized or anthropomorphized animal could fit into that. I feel like it kind of just depends on like your definition, and like it could even come down to like how gatekeepy people want to be in their definitions. Whether or not it's sort of like the prototypical like thing that would appeal to the furry community specifically, like I don't know, I can't really speak to that. But I would say that like, could it fit into the like broad definition that's often sort of put forth? I would say yes. That doesn't mean that it inherently is furry. I'm just saying that it is not inherently not furry. So I feel like those definitions kind of just come down to like the individual association.
I feel like the question I keep driving forward is like, when you look at the characters, right, in Beastars, do you think if they weren't animals, they'd be furries? I guess that's the sort of instance I'm trying to drive.
Well, I'm confused by the question, because
It's
if they
like,
weren't animalistic, then they wouldn't relate to furriness at all.
Well, that's what I mean. It's like
anthropomorphic animal is like the...
I'm very curious, like, to my extent of understanding with furry culture.
Do I look at it and see furry? Is that what you're trying to ask?
I guess that's the question I'm trying to ask. Is like, when I look at the identities of the characters, I understand like a lot of the divides that they exist with. And I'm not actually sure if, like, you know, what we see with the main character, not in terms of like his fixation, but just in terms of trying to identify with what he understands himself to be in the world around him. I wasn't really sure if that was like a general part of furry identity.
Okay, so are you trying to ask if you think that like the narrative is sort of what's the word, calling upon or reflecting or reminiscent of like furry identity, like itself, or like furry struggles, I guess? Is that kind of what you're asking?
Yeah.
Again, I don't know if I'm the right person to speak to this. I would be skeptical of like concluding that that was the author's intent, but I think that the beautiful thing about media is that like whatever associations or personal reflections people glean from media are valid. So if like somebody did make those connections, I feel like that'd be fair. Whether or not those connections are like inherently there, I feel like that's kind of questionable. Like it more seems like the author's intent, like, not that I would know, you know, but like my sort of perception was more to just talk about ideas around like the self and desire versus like social acceptability, sort of like that primal versus like, I hate the word like civilized, but you know, that sort of like dichotomy that people like put forth. I feel like that feels more like the central theme of the anime. I don't know if that answered your question, but
No, it kind of does, because like to an extent, what we see with a lot of characters, like in Beastars, the show and the manga, is a lot of characters struggle with how they want to be in the Beastars world itself, and less so trying to understand, what it is they're trying to express. And I feel like it's a very like universal tale in terms of like struggling with identity or struggling with what you want to be in the world.
I think that's a better way of putting it. That it's so universal, like as an experience that a lot of different communities and people could probably kind of relate to it. I feel like that's you kind of hit it on the head. Because right now we're reading like not even right now, like in bleh. Because like right now I'm just thinking about like the many different stories about identity and the many different sort of like experiences that people have lived that they could connect to this piece of media, as like a reflection. So I definitely think you hit the nail on the head there. I feel like I would less call it like just an inherently like, sort of furry story and more just a human condition story of like, despite being about animals, like that's the kind of ironic part, is it very much is the human condition story of like trying to find your place in the world, and trying to mitigate your needs versus like the needs of like the other or like the society or like people around you. Um, but yeah. Now, do you have any thoughts on all of this?
So, one thing I'm curious about is your thoughts on the animation because it is very unusual to see, 3D animated shows. So, at least for anime. So, how do you feel about it? Does it make you feel almost like it is not anime because it is very different in appearance from a lot of other shows? What are your feelings?
That's interesting. Whether or not it feels like anime, that's a hard question. I feel like my mind has just been so ingrained to like, okay, I'm gonna sit down and I'm gonna watch anime, and this is anime. Oh look, I'm watching Beastars. I know that even before I touch it, even before I look at it as an anime. Also, it's in Japanese. So I feel like just going in, my brain is already so programmed to say anime that it's very hard to like know what impression I would get if this was just put in front of me with like no expectations and no context. So whether or not my brain would read it as anime in that sense, I'm not sure. I do think of Beastars as an anime, but again, I have that sort of like background knowledge and association. About the CGI though, like my sort of overall impression, I would say that sometimes if I look at a clip in isolation, I do go like, haha, yeah, that looks CGI has a long way to go. I do think that. But when you take it as a whole, it's so beautifully and well done, and you can see just how good they are at making CGI work. I feel like I said, Beastars really benefits from being like an art piece where they have this overall set of motifs and theatrical sort of like themes and presentations, and I feel like that whatever flaws CGI has as a medium of creating anime, it's sort of overcome by sort of like the whole being greater than the sum of the parts. And I would definitely like say that that's the overall summary I would give of like why Beastars works as a CGI and piece of animation. It's very well done, I would say, even if the technology can sometimes be limited inherently, at least in its current use as far as like CGI goes.
Yeah, and as a person who's read a lot of the manga, I'm not caught up with it currently, but I did read it before the anime came out. So my experience was with a lot with the art style, and I was very curious how they would attempt to adapt it. I did feel like when the anime came out that the CGI was a very smart choice in terms of the expressions of the characters are very key to a lot of the scenes. And actually watching them work with the CGI at the animation studio, it did feel like they were being very true to the characters.
Do you think the sort of surrealness of CGI like enhanced it?
I feel like it did because in a sense, I feel like the sort of uncanniness about CGI is that it looks like a person in a mocap suit. If you like separate it out to like everything that you're experiencing is just a person like in a suit or like a model of a person moving in ways directed by the CGI director. And I feel like because Beastars is a very very much centered around the fact that like all these people are experiencing just very different but very centered human experiences. I felt like that was a very interesting and very very nice choice that they made. Because you look at all the characters in Beastars, all of which are different kinds of animals living various different lives because of their circumstances, and they all feel very human in their movements. And I feel like that was a really nice thing that they nailed for the adaptation of this manga.
Yeah, I get what you mean. They did a very good job of creating very human nuances and eccentricities. Like the main character, even though he's a wolf, the way he kind of skulks in the shadows and is very awkward in his movements, I feel like just conveys so much about his personality, and does feel just very like a person. You know what I mean? They did a really good job with that. I would definitely agree. So yeah, highly recommend Beastars, even though I haven't finished it yet. Go ahead and give it a watch and let us know what you think
Watch Beastars
down in the comments. And if you watch Beastars and somebody says you're a furry now, look at them and go, so what if I am? That's what you got to do. And then give them a high five and make happy time.
What?
Let's redo that. Hold on.
Wait, I have a question.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
So when is Beastars meeting Spider Girl? So what or Spider-chan?
Is Spider CGI?
Parts of it are CGI.
Okay.
Parts of it are like normal, like hand drawn.
But spiders are animals, so they must go to. She must be at the school or be considering going, right?
They actually describe to some extent. Insects are just eaten outright, like they're a primary source of protein, especially for carnivorous animals at the school that the story takes place in. It is not a question of whether or not they are sentient, as most animals are sentient in this universe. It's just kind of one of those things in Beastars that I really like. It's the sort of thing that's like, I kind of would like to know, but the answer will likely be very unsettling. So don't tell me.
Whether or not they're like sentient?
Yes.
Yeah. What if that'll be like the season 3 plot of like the bug rights movement? Because for context, it's illegal to eat meat. But obviously it's not illegal to eat bug meat.
Yeah, and that doesn't stop a lot of people in any case.
From eating
so the
meat,
fact
yeah,
that they've accepted just eating bugs in this world is interesting into itself.
Yeah, that is interesting. I really can't wait to like watch more, because I know that this might not get explored explicitly, like Eddie's implying it's not, but so many of those other like sort of nuances or questions or like breaking down what this would look like is explored. I can tell by the things Eddie has brought up or just things I've seen while looking over his shoulder. And I'm just really vroom motorcycle. I'm just very much looking forward to seeing more.
He's going to watch Beastars right now.
Yeah, he's on his way. He's in a hurry. He's like, I've had a long day at work. I just want to sit on my couch, eat some popcorn, and watch this wolf cry.